At the kitchen table, a refund check gets celebrated like free money, while the paycheck stubs that funded it sit ignored in a shoebox. Tax confusion survives because payroll habits, family advice, viral clips, and office rumors keep sounding more official than the actual forms. How did a yearly paperwork chore become a national festival of confident misunderstanding? By the end, the mistakes stop looking random and start looking like an entire country trying to negotiate with math. 1. On payday, the biggest tax misunderstanding arrives disguised as relief. Someone sees a huge refund and announces they beat the system, as if the government sent a gift basket. Nobody points at the smaller paychecks all year, quietly prepaying the celebration. The victory lap happens beside a coffee mug, a laptop, and 12 months of money that could have been theirs sooner. It's dirty say so. 2. At a kitchen counter in February, a freelancer drops every receipt into a folder labeled write-offs with the confidence of a courtroom lawyer. New headphones, gas station snacks, a dog bed, all of it goes in. The missing detail is business purpose, not paper density. By midnight, the folder looks less like accounting and more like a scrapbook of a wishful thinking. 3. The extension request gets treated like a magic pause button at a tiny apartment desk. The form goes through, the person relaxes, and the unpaid balance sits there like a silent house guest. Filing later does not mean paying later. The calendar moves forward. The balance does too, and the laptop glow suddenly feels less friendly. 4. Inside a break room. Someone insists overtime is not worth it because taxes will take all the extra money. 3 co-workers nod like they have heard ancient payroll wisdom. The paycheck still rises, just not by the full amount. The myth survives because losing part of a dollar feels worse than gaining the rest of it. 5. At a baby shower, one aunt explains that having a child automatically creates a giant refund. The room accepts it between cupcakes and paper plates. The reality depends on income. Eligibility credits? Timing and forms nobody wants to discuss near balloons. The baby is adorable, but not a guaranteed tax strategy in tiny socks. 6. The shoebox of receipts gets dumped onto a dining table like evidence in a dramatic trial. Grocery slips, oil changes, school supplies, and one mysterious hardware receipt all blur together. The person believes volume creates legitimacy. By the end, the pile is taller than the actual deduction, and the calculator looks personally offended. 7. In a rideshare driver's glove compartment, gas receipts are guarded like treasure maps. The driver believes every mile, every snack, and every air freshener cancels the tax bill. Vehicle expenses can matter, but records and methods matter too. The confusion rides shotgun while the real mileage log sits empty in the app nobody opened. 8. Before the first paycheck at a new job, the withholding form gets filled out like a personality quiz. Someone picks numbers based on vibes, old advice, and a desire for more money now. Months later, the tax bill arrives with no interest in vibes. The form was not a mood board. It was the faucet handle. 9. At a family dinner, the phrase tax bracket turns the table into a panic room. Someone claims a raise can push the whole salary into a higher tax rate and make them poorer. The higher rate usually applies only to the next slice. But the myth sounds so dramatic that the raise gets side-eyed like a trap. 10. Inside a small office, a manager says bonuses get taxed more and everyone groans at payroll like it committed a social crime. The withholding may look harsher, but the final tax math settles later. Still, the bonus hits the bank account wearing a smaller jacket, and the roomer gets promoted before the employee does. 11. The home office deduction becomes a fantasy renovation project by spring. A corner desk appears in the bedroom. Then the whole apartment gets mentally reclassified as headquarters. Exclusive business use is the part everyone skips because it ruins the mood. The folding chair may be professional, but the laundry basket and frame is not helping the argument. 12. At a charity drop-off, 3 garbage bags of old clothes become at least $1,000 in someone's head. The receipt is blank, the sweaters are tired, and the tax value is not based on emotional attachment. The donation bin closes with a metallic thud, taking several inflated estimates with it. 13. When a teenager gets a first job, the parent says you do not make enough to worry about taxes. The first paycheck says otherwise in neat little deductions. Filing rules depend on details, not family confidence. The teen learns the adult economy through a sandwich shop uniform and a line item nobody explained. 14. At a wedding planning table, marriage gets described as a tax discount with flowers. Then the couple discovers income, deductions, benefits, and withholding can all change in less romantic ways. The misunderstanding survives because married filing jointly sounds like a coupon. The spreadsheet sits between the centerpieces, politely ruining the fairy tale. 15. The side hustle starts with handmade candles and ends with a cousin declaring, "Losses are good because taxes." Nobody mentions that losing real money is still losing real money. A deduction can soften the landing. It does not turn a bad business into a secret ATM. The wax melts faster than the financial logic. 16. At the car dealership, someone hears tax credit and imagines a discount sliding off the sticker price like a movie coupon. The paperwork disagrees. Credit's eligibility rules, timing, and income limits do not care about showroom excitement. The salesperson smiles. The buyer nods, and the tax benefit remains somewhere far away from the key handoff. 17. Inside a college dorm. A student assumes scholarship money is always invisible to taxes because education sounds morally protected. Tuition help can be one thing, room and board another. The award letter looks clean until the categories start separating. The dorm fridge hums beside a lesson no orientation tour included. 18. The cash job feels invisible because no one printed a form. A weekend painter gets paid in 20s, folds them into a wallet, and calls it off the books. Income does not become imaginary because the printer was spared. The paint dries on the wall while the paper trail exists in other people's records. 19. At a suburban barbecue, someone announces that rich people deduct everything and therefore nobody normal should bother understanding taxes. The statement lands beautifully beside the potato salad. It also gives everyone permission to stay confused. The grill smokes, the myth expands, and responsibility gets outsourced to a villain in a nicer driveway. 20. When the tax software asks about cryptocurrency, the room gets quiet. The person clicks slowly, remembering 3 trades, 1 meme coin, and a group chat that said taxes only happen when money reaches a bank. The digital coins may be imaginary looking, but the reporting question is very real. The cursor blinks like a tiny auditor. 21. At a teacher's desk. Classroom supplies are stacked with pride and mild resentment. The teacher assumes every dollar spent for students comes back at tax time. Some benefits exist, but not enough to turn the classroom closet into a reimbursement counter. The scissors markers and glue sticks remain noble, useful, and not nearly as deductible as hoped. 22. The word dependent becomes a family wrestling match every spring. One parent says support means one thing. The other says custody means another, and a grandparent enters with a rumor from 1998. Eligibility is more specific than dinner table memory. The child keeps coloring while adults negotiate tax law over chicken nuggets. 23. At the office printer, someone whispers that filing early increases audit risk because it looks too eager. No one knows where this came from, but it has the smooth confidence of fake wisdom. The return is not a job interview. The printer warms up anyway, as if punctuality itself has become suspicious behavior. 24. The refund advance ad looks like a shortcut out of a tight month. A person hears "Get your refund today" and forgets that speed often has terms attached. The money is not extra. It is early access with paperwork standing behind it. The neon sign glows like convenience, and convenience has excellent posture. 25. On a couch surrounded by envelopes, someone decides not to open one because bad news can wait. The envelope contains a form needed to match the return. Waiting does not delete the mismatch. It just saves the surprise for a worse hour. The unopened paper sits there, quietly becoming the main character. So far, the file is still domestic. Refunds at kitchen tables, receipts in shoeboxes, relatives explaining money with dessert forks. The next layer is where confusion gets uniforms, policies apps, and official-looking nonsense. 26. At a payroll meeting, an employee asks to be paid as a contractor because less tax comes out. The room nods until self-employment tax, benefits, and responsibility enter like uninvited supervisors. No withholding is not the same as no tax. The paycheck looks bigger for a moment. Then the future invoice clears its throat. 27. The online marketplace seller celebrates a great year. until a tax form arrives from a platform they thought was just an app. Every sale felt casual because it happened between couch photos and shipping labels. The platform kept better records than the seller did. The inbox notification lands with the emotional weight of a clipboard. 28. At a flea market booth, cash sales are counted under the table with old-school satisfaction. The seller believes small bills have a privacy shield. Then inventory purchases, payment apps, booth fees, and bank deposits start telling the same story from different angles. The cigar box closes, but the math keeps breathing through the cracks. 29. Inside a human resources webinar, someone asks if moving to another state for 2 months means they can pick the cheaper tax place. The slide deck pauses emotionally. States do not always treat physical presence like a vacation mood. The beach laptop may look free, but the residency question brought a folding chair. 30. The work-from-home employee tries to deduct commuting miles from the bedroom to the kitchen. The joke becomes less funny when the mileage sheet starts including coffee runs. Business travel rules do not expand just because the commute got shorter. The car stays in the driveway, somehow still accused of working overtime. 31. At a restaurant after closing, a server counts tips and says cash tips are different because they are private. The payment system, scheduled coworkers, and bank deposits quietly disagree. Tip income does not become invisible because it arrived folded. The apron pocket feels less like a loophole and more like a tiny paperwork trap. 32. The small business owner buys a massive truck in December because a friend said it wipes out taxes. No one discusses actual use, limits income, or whether the business needed a truck at all. The vehicle shines in the driveway like a deduction with tires. By April, the monthly payment is the only part performing reliably. 33. At a tax prep chain, someone asks whether claiming zero still means the safest refund. The phrase came from parents, coworkers, and decades of paycheck folklore. Withholding can prevent surprises, but over-withholding is not a trophy. The customer nods at the screen while the government enjoys an interest-free loan with excellent manners. 34. The lottery ticket dream includes a mansion, a boat, and somehow no tax bill. The winner in the fantasy says, "I already paid when I bought the ticket." That is not how winnings work. The imagined champagne is barely poured before the tax forms arrive, dressed more soberly than everyone else at the party. 35. In a group chat, someone claims gifts are always taxed to the person receiving them. Panic follows immediately because a parent just helped with rent. Gift tax rules are more complicated, and recipients are not automatically handed a tax bill for every family rescue. The chat produces 19 messages and 0 qualified answers. 36. At a garage sale, a neighbor wonders if selling old furniture creates a tax nightmare. The couch was bought for more than it sold for, but fear travels faster than context. Not every sale is a profit story. The buyer carries away a scratched coffee table while the seller prepares emotionally for a form that never comes. 37. The influencer writes off a vacation because one photo included a laptop on the hotel bed. The caption says work trip. The itinerary says pool, spa, and one email. Business purpose is not created by opening a spreadsheet near a balcony. The sunset looks productive only to the person trying to deduct it. 38. At a church raffle, the winner assumes a prize is tax-free because the setting feels wholesome. A donated television does not become invisible just because it sat beside a bake sale. Prizes can still count. The winner smiles for a photo, holding both the TV and a future form nobody wants in the frame. 39. The phrase standard deduction sounds like settling, so someone itemizes with the energy of a treasure hunter. Medical receipts, mortgage papers, donations, and taxes spread across the table. Then the total loses to the standard amount by a mile. The heroic pile of paperwork becomes a very organized way to choose the easier option. 40. At a startup office, equity compensation gets explained with hand gestures and optimism. An employee hears shares and imagines future wealth without present paperwork. Vesting, exercising, selling, and tax timing are not the same event. The company hoodie still smells new, while the financial confusion matures faster than the stock. 41. The landlord with one rental house calls every repair an upgrade because both involve hardware store receipts, paint, plumbing appliances, and improvements blur into one confident expense category. Timing matters because some costs are handled differently. The rental ledger looks tidy until the roof replacement enters wearing a very different accounting hat. 42. At a courthouse hallway. Someone says legal fees are always deductible because lawyers are expensive, and that feels unfair. Expensive is not a tax category. Personal business, employment, and other issues do not all sit in the same basket. The invoice is painful, but pain alone does not qualify as paperwork logic. 43. The gym membership gets described as medical because health is important. A friend adds that stress relief should count too. The argument has emotional strength and tax weakness. Unless it fits narrow rules, the treadmill remains a personal expense. The person walks 3 miles in place and gets nowhere with the deduction. 44. At a farmer's market. A vendor accepts payment through 4 apps and assumes the confusion protects them. It mostly protects the confusion. Sales records scattered across platforms still point back to the same table, the same jars, and the same income. The jam labels are handwritten. The payment trail is not. 45. The new homeowner hears mortgage deduction and mentally subtracts the whole payment. Principal interest, taxes, insurance, and escrow all get tossed into one hopeful bucket. Only certain pieces may matter. The welcome mat still says home sweet home, but the amortization schedule is less sentimental. 46. At a birthday dinner. Someone says cash gifts for a side business are not income if relatives gave them. Then the relatives start calling them payments for cakes, designs, and repairs. Labels matter less than what actually happened. The birthday candles go out, and the business model remains lit. 47. The old computer in the closet becomes a business asset the moment tax season feels expensive. Someone claims it was used for work, mostly in the sense that work emails once appeared on it. Personal leftovers do not automatically become tax shields. The dusty keyboard enters the return like a witness with memory problems. 48. At a community center seminar, someone asks if cashing out retirement money is fine because it is my money. It is, which does not mean there are no tax consequences. Early access can bring extra costs. The pamphlet on the folding chair suddenly looks less like advice and more like a warning label, sir. 49. The moving truck receipt gets saved with triumph after a job change. A friend remembers moving deductions from years ago and treats memory like current law. Rules change and old advice ages badly in drawers. The cardboard boxes are unpacked in the new apartment, while the deduction stays back in the past. 50. On April 15th, the person who ignored every form suddenly becomes a philosopher of fairness. They announce the system is too complicated, which may be true, but does not locate the missing wage statement. The laptop battery drops, the password reset fails, and civic frustration becomes a very inefficient filing method. By now, the misunderstanding has left the kitchen and entered workplaces, apps, small businesses, and family money. The pattern is not ignorance alone. It is confidence arriving before the instructions do. The shoebox, the refund celebration, the platform form, and the late-night laptop all belong to the same comedy of paperwork. The second half gets stranger because the mistakes become less private. Employers repeat them, software flatters them, friends endorse them, and official envelopes start correcting everybody in public. 51. At a tax software screen, the word free appears in large friendly letters. The user relaxes until a side hustle, student loan form, stock sale, or state return quietly moves them into paid territory. Free often means free under conditions. The button stays cheerful while the checkout page develops a personality. 52. The person with 2 jobs assumes each employer withheld enough because both paychecks looked normal. Each payroll system saw only its own slice of income, not the whole year. The combined picture can change the math. 2 neat pay stubs sit side by side, pretending they have met before. 53. In a warehouse locker room. A worker says overtime should be refused in December to avoid taxes. The myth wins because the paycheck withholding looks dramatic. Actual tax rates work in layers, not trapdoors. The extra shift may still be tiring, but the math is not hiding behind a forklift waiting to punish ambition. 54. At a family-owned shop, the owner pays relatives under the table and calls it helping out. The relatives call it flexible. The forms call it something else entirely. Payroll rules do not disappear because everyone shares a last name and potato salad. The cash envelope feels warm until responsibility walks in through the back door. 55. The vacation rental listing becomes a business after 2 weekends of guests and 1 spreadsheet. The owner assumes every towel, candle streaming subscription, and beach chair now has tax importance. Some expenses may connect. Others are lifestyle wearing a name tag. The ocean view remains beautiful and completely uninterested in exaggeration. 56. On a live stream, a creator tells followers that forming a company means they no longer pay personal taxes. The chat explodes with crown emojis and bad confidence. Business structure can change reporting, not make income evaporate. The ring light shines on a sentence that should have stayed in draft mode. 57. The refund gets spent before it arrives because the estimate looked official. Then a form changes, a credit phases out, or a number was typed wrong. The planned couch, vacation and debt payoff all stand in line behind reality. The bank account refreshes with the cold manners of a locked door. 58. At a farmer's market registration table, someone says hobby income does not count because it is for fun. The jars sell out. The payments arrive, and fun starts producing records. The tax system does not ask whether the seller enjoyed themselves. The handmade sign says passion project, but the cash box says please explain. 59. Inside a quiet home office, a person deducts business meals because lunch happened during work hours. By that logic, every sandwich in America has a job. Business context matters more than eating near a laptop. The receipt from the deli sits on the desk, bravely pretending to attend a meeting. 60. The state tax refund from last year shows up as a confusing form this year. Someone says they taxed my refund, as if the calendar betrayed them. Sometimes last year's deduction created this year's income wrinkle. The envelope feels like a sequel nobody asked for, starring the same money in a different costume. 61. At a dealership finance desk, sales tax gets mistaken for income tax because both words feel official and unpleasant. The buyer asks if the car payment lowers their federal bill. The finance manager blinks with professional restraint. The paperwork stack grows taller, and none of it turns the sedan into a personal deduction machine. 62. The new investor sells one stock at a loss and celebrates canceling taxes forever. Capital losses can help, but they do not erase every kind of income like a magic eraser. The brokerage screen turns red, which feels dramatic enough to deserve more power than it has. The portfolio is down. The myth is up. 63. During a divorce conversation, someone assumes the tax outcome is obvious because the agreement feels emotionally final. Dependents filing status, support property, and timing can each have different consequences. Feelings close one chapter, forms open another. The conference room table holds 2 water bottles and 5 ways to misunderstand the same settlement. 64. At a school fundraiser, volunteers call every purchase a donation because the cause is good. Buying wrapping paper, cookies, or a raffle ticket is not the same as handing over a clean, charitable gift. Value received matters. The brochure sparkles with school spirit while the deduction quietly steps away from the cookie dough. 65. The person who owes tax assumes filing nothing prevents the bill from becoming real. It is the financial version of hiding from a smoke alarm by closing the bedroom door. Filing and paying are related, but silence rarely improves the situation. The unopened laptop becomes a monument to avoidable suspense. 66. On a neighborhood forum, someone says audits only happen to millionaires and criminals. The sentence gets liked by people with messy returns, cash income, and imaginary deductions. Review risk can come from mismatches and unusual claims too. The forum thread continues under a username shaped like a confession. 67. At a medical office, someone asks if every copay is deductible because healthcare is expensive. The answer depends on thresholds and totals, which is exactly where enthusiasm goes to cool down. Expense does not automatically equal benefit. The receipt folder grows heavy while the actual tax effect stays very light. 68. The person relocating for remote work assumes taxes follow the company headquarters, their body desk apartment, and daily work happens somewhere else. But the paycheck logo feels persuasive. State rules may care where the work is performed. The laptop opens in a new state. and the old assumption does not travel as well. 69. At a coffee shop, a freelancer says estimated payments are optional because the year is not over yet. Income arrives now. Obligations may arrive during the year, and surprise is not a strategy. The latte foam looks calm. The calendar app, if opened, would be less supportive. 70. The family business gives a teenager a paycheck, so the money stays in the family. That can be legitimate when the work is real and records are clean. But the child cannot be paid for existing near the cash register. The timesheet contains 3 shifts, 2 doodles, and 1 very suspicious Saturday. 71. Inside a suburban garage, a reseller stacks sneakers, toys, and electronics, while saying taxes only matter after real profit. The boxes say otherwise because sales, cost, inventory, and fees all need tracking. Profit is not whatever remains after vibes. The garage looks like a business, even if the owner keeps calling it a phase. 72. At a bank counter, someone asks if depositing cash creates tax automatically. The teller's expression becomes a careful public service announcement. Deposits are not taxes by themselves, but unexplained money can invite questions. The cash slides across the counter, and suddenly the customer wishes their story had better receipts. 73. The inheritance conversation begins with panic because everyone has heard horror stories from someone's cousin. For most ordinary heirs, the feared tax bill is not the simple monster described at dinner. But assets gains, and paperwork can still matter later. The family table goes quiet, not from grief this time, but from vocabulary. 74. On a construction site. A worker brags that being paid in checks under a business name means personal taxes vanish. The business name is not a curtain. It is a label. Income still has to land somewhere. The hard hat shines in the sun while the accounting theory collapses without scaffolding. 75. The old advice says to keep receipts for 7 years. Forever, or until the garage becomes a paper museum. The person keeps everything except the documents that actually explain the return. Record keeping is not hoarding with folders. The filing cabinet groans under 10 years of sandwich receipts and 1 missing wage form. Now the file is narrowing. The misunderstandings are not just about money. They are about control. People want taxes to behave like rumors, loopholes, coupons, punishments, and lucky charms. 76. At a tax appointment, someone says, just make it look better, as if the preparer is a lighting technician. The numbers came from wages, accounts, sales, and forms already sitting in the system. Professional help can organize reality. It does not repaint it. The chair squeaks under the weight of unmet expectations. 77. The person who changed names after marriage assumes the tax return will understand the romance automatically. Government databases are not sentimental. A mismatch between names and records can slow everything down. The wedding photos glow on the wall, while the form gets stuck on a detail the couple thought was purely decorative. 78. In a break room, someone claims a refund means the return was correct. Refunds can happen even when a return has problems. Missing income or bad assumptions. Money arriving is not a certificate of accuracy. The direct deposit lands, everyone relaxes, and the paperwork sits in the background like a delayed plot twist. 79. The small nonprofit treasurer assumes nonprofit means no tax paperwork because the mission is good. The mission may be good. The forms are still forms. Exemption is not the same as invisibility. The folding table has donation jars, volunteer cookies, and a calendar reminder nobody wants to own. 80. At a casino, someone pockets winnings and points at losses from earlier that night like a shield. Losses may matter only with proper records and limits, not with dramatic storytelling at the cashier cage. The slot machine lights keep flashing. The tax logic, unlike the machine, does not respond to emotion. 81. The person who sells a house assumes the whole gain is tax-free because primary residence sounds powerful. Exclusions can help, but rules and amounts matter. Improvements, timing, ownership, and use all enter the room. The sold sign looks simple from the curb. The closing statement has other plans. 82. On a parenting forum, someone says daycare costs come back dollar for dollar. The replies become a festival of half-remembered credits. Help may exist, but it is not a full reimbursement for surviving childcare. The preschool cubbies stay adorable while the parents discover that tax relief is rarely as generous as exhaustion deserves. 83. At a local diner, a retired couple assumes Social Security is never taxed because they already paid into it. Then other income enters the picture and changes the mood. Retirement does not make every line item untouchable. The coffee refills arrive faster than the explanation, which feels personally unfair. Say, 84. The person who donated through a checkout screen rounds up proudly and expects a grand charitable deduction later. The receipt may not even be saved. And the amount is 12 cents. The gesture is fine. The tax fantasy is doing too much. The grocery bag leaves with bread, milk, and exaggerated civic pride. 85. Inside a cramped apartment, roommates argue over who gets to claim the shared internet bill as a work expense. Everyone works from home sometimes, streams constantly, and uses the same router for everything. Mixed personal use makes clean deductions messy. The modem blinks in the corner, the only device smart enough to stay silent. 86. At a craft fair, the seller prices items below cost and says the loss will help at tax time. The booth fee supplies, and 8 hours of sitting still disagree with the plan. A tax loss is not applause. The handmade sign says small business, but the calculator says expensive hobby with candles. 87. The official-looking letter gets posted online with the caption, "Is this a scam?" Half the comments say ignore it, half say panic. The real answer is to verify carefully, not crowdsource fear from strangers. The envelope becomes internet content while the deadline sits quietly in the corner, aging like milk. 88. At a payroll desk, an employee asks to be classified differently because a friend said one word saves money. Worker classification is not a costume change. Control duties, independence, and records matter more than preference. The job title on the badge stays the same while the fantasy paperwork walks out alone. 89. The person who filed incorrectly last year assumes that repeating it creates tradition. They say it went through before, which is not the same as it was right. Systems can miss things before they correct them. The old return becomes a bad template, copied carefully like a recipe for trouble. 90. In a quiet apartment after midnight, the taxpayer finally sees the pattern. Every shortcut depended on someone else not noticing. The receipt pile, app payments, cash jobs, and old advice all asked reality to be less organized than it is. The forms are boring, but boring does not mean blind. The closing section is where the excuses stop being cute. What began as confusion now looks like a national habit of treating paperwork as negotiable until the paperwork answers back. No. 91. The person who says taxes are theft still wants the refund deposited quickly, accurately, and preferably by Friday. The contradiction sits there in full fluorescent lighting. Resentment toward the system does not prevent dependence on its machinery. The bank app refreshes again, proving ideology has excellent direct deposit expectations. 92. At a family gathering, the loudest tax expert is the uncle who has not filed correctly since dial-up internet. He speaks in absolutes, waves a fork, and defeats quieter relatives with volume. Confidence becomes the family credential. The pie is sliced, the advice spreads, and nobody asks for a source. 93. The person who fears an audit keeps terrible records because records feel like inviting one. This is backwards in the least dramatic way possible. Clean documentation is not a flare gun. It is a seatbelt. The drawer full of crumpled receipts offers the emotional security of a cardboard umbrella. 94. At a small business meeting, the owner says taxes are impossible, then refuses to separate personal and business spending. The same debit card buys inventory, groceries, movie tickets, and printer ink. Complexity did not arrive alone. It was invited. The bank statement reads like a diary with accounting consequences. 95. The viral video promises 3 tax secrets they do not want you to know. Secret 1 is vague, Secret 2 is risky, and Secret 3 requires buying a course. The comments call it genius before anyone checks it. The ring light glows over the oldest tax product in America. Confidence for sale. 96. The person who wants a bigger refund changes withholding without understanding the trade-off. More refund usually means less paycheck, and less refund usually means more paycheck. It is timing, not alchemy. The payroll portal accepts the change politely, like a vending machine selling the same soda in different bottles. 97. At a community college office, a student assumes tuition credits belong to whoever paid the bill, no matter whose name is on the forms. Education benefits follow specific rules, not family fairness debates. The bursar statement sits between parent and student like a referee, nobody invited. 98. The gig worker opens 5 payment apps and says, "They will not connect all this." Maybe not neatly, but the income still belongs to one person with one name, one phone, and one bank account. Fragmentation feels like privacy until filing season asks for totals. The apps look separate. The rent payment knows better. 99. In a home office, someone types numbers from memory because the real forms are somewhere. Memory improves stories, not returns. Wage statements, interest forms, brokerage summaries, and business records exist because guessing is a weak accounting system. The keyboard clicks confidently while the missing documents watch from a kitchen drawer. 100. The last-minute filer blames the software, the agency, the employer, the bank, the mail, and the moon before admitting the return was started 2 hours before the deadline. Procrastination puts every tiny problem under stadium lights. The password reset email arrives late, not because of conspiracy, but because April has excellent comic timing. 101. After all the rumors, apps, relatives, side hustles, and envelopes, the biggest misunderstanding is still simple. People want taxes to be a personality contest. Clever should beat boring, confidence should beat records, and vibes should beat forms. Then the system asks for dates, amounts, names, and proof. The room goes quiet because proof has no sense of humor. Back at the kitchen table, that refund no longer looks like free money. It looks like the final scene of a year nobody tracked closely enough. The deeper pattern is not that people misunderstand taxes once. It is that they keep treating taxes like folklore until the numbers arrive with receipts. What is the most confident tax advice you have ever heard from someone who clearly should not have been trusted near a calculator? Drop it in the comments. And please keep the shoebox closed until it is ready to testify.